Everything I've done, there's always a little bit of something I would just like to tweak a little bit. So it's really, I'm still hunting down the great tune that I've never written. It's somewhere out there, and that's what makes me get up in the morning. I just know I can do better.
Hey, this is Blaudus, and this video is about Hans Zimmer. And Hans Zimmer is just hugely inspirational to me. I remember seeing him perform live with his orchestra, and my wife and I just cried our eyes out the whole performance. It was so beautiful, just bringing back all the memories from all the movies that he's composed for and all the beautiful work he's done. And I hope you get some inspiration from these videos and this conversation with Hans Zimmer.
One of the things great musicians do is not how well they play, it's how well they listen to each other. I usually spend a lot of time looking at color charts or sitting with the DP or just looking at the way things are graded from the previous movie or where we're going now, what the costumes are. Chris Nolan and Denis, we have this process whereby I don't really read the script. I ask them to tell me the story because then I know what's in their head. And then straight away, it's off to the designs and the DP and what's the color spectrum going to be like. Because I have this sort of, and it's hard to describe. Look, all I can tell you is there's a few frames in The Lion King, the original Lion King, and I only had a black and white drawing, and the colors and what the music is doing is completely wrong, and it clashes, and nobody seems to understand that other than me. But for me, it's fingers down a chalkboard. So yes, I'm insane, I admit it. And it's nice to have a sonic imprint from one place and to have everybody sitting in the right place. And at the same time, there's some sort of historical thing involved because some of the players that we've sampled extensively aren't playing anymore. Or there's a cellist who had a Stradivarius, which he sold for vast amounts of money to a collector in Hong Kong. And so it's basically gone, except I still have it. I still have it, and I still have that performance he gave when we're sampling it. So that is my sort of world. I don't need a lot more. I just need to know the things that I use very, very, very well. It's like kids sitting there with Legos. It always is. When music sounds good, it's because it's playing. You have to have a playfulness if you do these situations. It gives you an opportunity to show off in music what is good about you. My studio, so actually some thought went into this room. The first thought was, if you build a room that's big enough, you don't have to worry about standing waves. You just get out of the way of the standing waves. So it's the length of it is bottom E, and behind the synth is a Brilliant curtain that flaps around with anything that's below 40 hertz. The whole structure is floating. But I didn't want it to look like a studio because I think I wanted it to look somewhere where people wanted to talk, where people wanted to make music, where people didn't get a sense of time, didn't get a sense of urgency. It's a room that invited ideas. And I have to say, I think I managed to do that. We managed to succeed in that respect pretty well. And what happens here all the time is, somebody starts tapping something, next thing you know, somebody's playing something. We've recorded whole scores in here of just people plugging in and playing and just having ideas, and which is how it should be. There should be a sort of a democratic element to making music, and as opposed to, this is not the most democratic studio, if you know what I mean. It costs a bit of money, but that being beside the point, that it feels like somewhere where humans can thrive as opposed to humans are being treated as behind the glass, and I just don't like that. I am preaching to the choir here, but I am saying something in a slightly different way because my job is slightly different. I am not an intellectual, I'm not a scientist, I'm none of those things. What I deal with is emotion. And what Sir David deals with, and what we've been trying to do all this time, is something very simple. We've been trying to make people fall in love with this little blue spot in our universe. try to recognize that we're not alone on this planet, and that we need the other creatures around us, and that we need to support these other creatures around us. And if we blow it, we're all dead. But we're not trying to scare you. We're just trying to make you fall in love. It takes me a long time to get to the first draft. I mean, John Powell actually said this to me years ago. We were talking about, why is it so hard to start? Why is it so hard to get going? And then suddenly, when you're in the middle of the project, everything you do is, the appropriate language somehow. You're using the appropriate harmony, you're using the appropriate sounds, etc. And he said, well, it's like anything. You just have to get it under your fingers. It's like you practice to get spontaneous. You practice what the subject is. You really try to work out what you want to write about and how you want to write about it. And then with me, that can be months, and then suddenly it all starts to fall into place. And, the first idea I will play, if I haven't thought about the movie, if I haven't made the plan, if I haven't figured out the big idea, I'm not going to keep it. It's just crap. But if I've had some time to think about it and really think about it and really immerse myself in it, there are moments where things happen spontaneously, but they're not really spontaneously, that because I have designed the moment to be, within the language of that film. I'm never done with the composing process because you can always improve something. My process is, it takes me a really long time to get started because the first thing I need to do is figure out an idea, something I haven't done before, because otherwise I get a bit bored. So there has to be a concept, and then the concept usually is something that is undoable, impossible to do. And I talk to the director about it, and usually what happens is, the problem is they like the concept, and then I have to actually go and do it. I mean, Dunkirk nearly killed me because, it was just a really simple idea, but then 7 months later, I was still trying to figure out how to actually make it work. And to answer your question about what the writing process is, once I have an idea about what, not just stylistically, but sonically, or I want to tell this story, I spend as much time experimenting, writing suites or just making up sounds. I spend far too much time playing with synthesizers and making sounds for a project until finally somebody says, we're running out of time, we got to get this movie done, and now take these themes and make them work to the scenes. And very often, once I've written this and once I really figured out what the sound of the movie is, what the notes are, what the arrangements are, and it then comes to actually going and doing the scenes. It's really helpful having other people, having collaborators involved in that, because at least I know all the way through what this movie is going to sound like and what it's going to be. And there was a whole very interesting group of French musicians/scientists who came in, who'd spent 10 years inventing a keyboard that could do all sorts of, without going into the technicalities, basically, if you do this, all that happens is it's a switch that goes on and off, right? Or you can play a little quieter. But they had managed to make a keyboard where you could express pretty much any emotion that you could express on a violin or, any of those other instruments that we keyboard players are always so incredibly envious of, because they can express true emotion. It's a keyboard called the Osmos, and at the same time they had speaker systems which it really came from the beginning of the 20th century. A speaker would be made out of wood and very organic materials. So all over our studio were they're really sculptures. And a lot of the instruments we were using ourselves were made by a sculptor. There's a man called Chaz Smith who lives in Northern California. He's a pedal steel guitarist, but he's a welder as well. And he doesn't just weld, like bridges and buildings. But what he's really interested in is making strange musical instruments. And he seems to have some unholy alliance, which I've never quite figured out, with the Boeing Corporation, who give him scrap metal and things. And he explains the metal to me, and it has names that I've never heard of and can't repeat. And part of his whole ethos is that everything has to be made out of scrap. And so these things which you can bow or play or rub or kick or hit with hammers, or they can be the most gentle sounds, or it's truly the sound of the monster under the earth. Very Dune-like. At first I didn't want to do it. You know, sometimes all the right things happen for all the wrong reasons. I didn't know how to do animation, and I thought, you know, oh, it's a Disney animated film, so it'll be like Fairy Tale Princess, and I kept saying, I don't know how to write Fairy Tale Princess music, and they kept saying, that's why we want you. My daughter at the time was 6 years old, and I'd never been able to take her to a premiere of any of my movies, and I thought, Dad wants to show off, so that's why I took the job. And there I was being flippant, you know, oh, I'm doing this movie about fuzzy animals. And suddenly I realized that the heart of the story is a child losing their father. And my father died when I was very young. Suddenly I was confronted with something. And, you know, the fuzzy animal movie became actually very serious and very profound for me. And so, yeah, I wrote a requiem for my dad. Home Depot is where, you know, they have pipes, they have things that we use. We can extend the length of a flute, we can go. Home Depot is our secret instrument building site. I make absolutely sure that we don't do cultural imperialism and that we don't go and just steal all the cliches of a culture. I try to surround myself with, I mean, you know, look, the studio is very international. I mean, Black Hawk Down, I have to think back. It's an interesting thing because I had Baba Mal from Mali, I had Hector Pereira from Brazil, I had Martin Tillman from Switzerland, I had Satnam Ramgotra from, well, I never know, is he Canadian or is he Indian? He doesn't know himself, it seems. This movie was 16 years ago, so, you know, I can't remember everybody who was on it. Craig Eastman from Kentucky. So, you know, and a German writing about Somalia. So it's not my job to be a musical anthropologist or even to be authentic. All I'm trying to do, I mean, you know, Lion King is another good example. You know, Lion King it's not real, it's not really Africa. But all I'm trying to say is that there is other cultures out there and we can embrace them. And in film music, it's really interesting because you can go and mix all this up. You do not have to be culturally specific. It gives you an opportunity to show off in music what is good about humanity in a funny way. So you can go on this international journey in music because you're not tied to language. You know, you're not tied to the specificity of language. You make up your own culture, you know, which is a bunch of musicians from many nationalities paraphrasing the story that happens on the screen. But I'm very worried and very wary ever of trying to do a parody of a culture. But yes, if I could just spend my whole life writing one theme, I would probably end up spending my whole life writing one theme. By this point, I haven't really spent budget, but it's no, usually the music editor will come or somebody will come and say, we have an orchestra booked on this and this date, and there's no way we're going to get it done unless you actually start focusing on the cues. Everything I've done, you know, there's always a little bit of something I would just like to tweak a little bit. So it's really, I'm still hunting down the great tune that I've never written. You know, it's somewhere out there, and that's what makes me get up in the morning. You know, I just know I can do better.